Hello, my name is Lee Taylor, and I really like to knit, so much so that some of my friends call me the Knitwit. I hope you enjoyed today's video and possibly even learned something. So let's get started. This week we're going to take a look at the stash dive of my brown yarns. We're going to talk about gauge once more. This may and should be the final time we talk about it. We're going to look at some updates, and then I have two separate little bonus bits. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it and see what this week has for us. Up first, we have the stash dive with the browns, which is in the bottom shelf down here behind me. So let's switch over to the overhead and take a look at these individually, and then we'll look at them all together as a group. So let's jump over. Let's take a look at these brown yarns, and we're going to start off with a hank. This is a lace weight yarn, and I apologize for my pronunciation. This is a Russian word that they, graciously spelled out in English, but I don't know the pronunciation. But I'm going to say Pehorka. It's P-E-H-O-R-K-A. Camel. I do know that's not a breed of camel. That I do know. This is 65% camel, 35% acrylic. It's very squishy. It's not soft. It's not horribly scratchy. It's just rustic. You can definitely tell that it's yarn. You may be able to see back here. You can see some fiber sticking up. I wouldn't call this wool. It reminds me more of like hair than wool, which again is not a bad thing. It's just different. 100 grams gives you 656 yards. That is a lot of yarn in just 100 grams. And the colorway is called natural. There's natural, and then there is beige, which is quite a bit lighter than this. I wouldn't call it a full beige, but definitely lighter. The normal, when you think of camel, that color. This is not one that I would probably use, and that is why it is stored in a hank rather than a cake. And I do not store on my shelf, I do not store balls of yarn. It's a cake or it's in a hank. Sometimes I call them a twist because they remind me of a twist donut. Anyways, this is the lace weight Pehorka camel. Next, we have a DK weight from the Yarn Bee Soft and Sleek line. Zoom in now that I'm done with the big yarn. This is all acrylic. There is some of this I have used, so it's not the full cake. But 114 grams gives you 478 yards, and the colorway is mink. And I wouldn't call it variegated. It's coming up brighter because I have a light to try and help with the shadow from the phone. It's definitely a darker, not super dark, but darker than what it's showing up on camera. But I would call it tonal colors. So it's coming up very silvery or pewtery on there, but it is definitely brown. Next we have worsted weight from Yarn Bee Soft Secret. This was Soft and Sleek. This is Soft Secret. And 100% acrylic, and 170 yards, or 170 grams gives you 300 yards, I apologize, in the colorway Cocoa. I say Cocoa because it ends in an A rather than Cocoa that would just end in an O, but that's me and my crazy pronunciations as a southerner. Again, showing up brighter on camera than it is in person because of the light, but it does have a very, very pretty sheen to it, which the light is helping capture that very well. Next we have an Aran weight in the Big Twist Value line. Again, this is not the entire skein, entire hank. 100% acrylic, 170 grams gives you 380 yards, and the colorway is chocolate brown. Next one, you'll have seen the some of the projects that I have knit from this before. This is an Aran Weight Karen Simply Soft brand acrylic yarn. 170 grams gives you 315 yards in the colorway Bone. And this is the color that I use to knit the noses for the gnomes, as well as I have knit a bunny that I named Wayne in honor of my great uncle that passed away earlier this year due to COVID. And the last in our brown section is an Aran Weight Premier yarns. They're just yarn tweed. It is all acrylic, 45 grams, gives you 98 yards. This is the entire cake, and the colorway is rust tweed. So let's get all of these yarns out together, and we will go over them as a group. We have the rust tweed, the bone, chocolate brown, cocoa, mink, and natural. So those are my yarns in the brown colorway. Next, we'll take a look at our Swatch Lab for this week. It once more is on gauge, but it is on gauge as it pertains to my project for October. I haven't been able to really explain gauge the way that I wanted to up to this point. So this is a gauge swatch that has multiple parts to it, which you'll see when I switch over to the overhead. But basically what it is I decided I was going to knit this shawl called the Warding Spell, which I've talked about in previous videos. And I had the yarn I knew that I was going to use, but I did not know what needles I was going to use yet, what needle size. So I started with the needle that I thought I might use, and I knit a section and garter stitch. And then I went up a needle size and knit a section and garter stitch, and then bigger needle section. And then when I got to the largest needle section that I knew I wouldn't knit larger than that, I decided then after I did that to switch from my metal circular needles to my bamboo circular needles and see the difference in gauge from that. So in the overhead, you'll see the gauge swatch as a whole, and then I will show you the different sections. I may not remember each needle that I have with it because I did not take notes on that, and I hate that I did that, but it shows how important gauge is when you're working on a project. So when I switch over to the overhead, you'll be able to see why gauge is so important. So let's go ahead and switch over to the overhead now and take a look at our gauge swatch for Swatch Lab. In this week's Swatch Lab, we're going to look at gauge once again. I know I've talked about that many times, and I know you're probably sick of it. I am getting rather, it's getting rather tedious because it's an important part of knitting, but I cannot get the words together to explain what it is that makes it important. So I did my gauge swatch with this yarn here, which is the yarn for the Warding Spell, which I know I've talked about on here. This is the project that I will be knitting throughout the month of October, and I don't know if I'll get it finished in October. There's a lot of yarn in this, but that's what I'm going to be. That's going to be my main knitting project through October, not counting the Temp Afghan. So let's look a little bit at my swatch for this. Let me zoom out here. See if I can even get it all in the same shot. I'm gonna have to go way out. Pardon the background. There we go. That shows it as clear as I'm gonna be able to get it all in one piece. So these light strands here show when I changed my needle. I was gonna go the same number of ridges, but I decided to go about the same number of inches instead. So let's zoom in and take a look, and we'll discuss what all of that is. So first off, we'll go over what size needle each section is. It's the same number of stitches wide in every panel. And I did not write down how wide that is. And honestly, I cannot remember. You know what? We'll just come up here and count, because I've got live stitches and I can count, and that'll be easy enough. Let's see here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40. That's what I thought I had. I had 40. Okay. So this first section down here, I used a 3.5 millimeter needle, and that gave me, you know, it's a relatively dense fabric. I mean, it's got stretch. Can't see my hand through it. So I was like, that's a little too dense for a scarf. There's a little bit too much texture feel there. It just doesn't have the right drape. I mean, it's not stiff by any means, but it's not as floopy is what I want. So I decided, okay, 3.5 is not going to be enough. So I'll jump up and knit with a 3.75. Now that's only one needle size more. And already you can see that it's a tiny bit wider than it is right here. Same stitches across, but it's a little bit wider. That means the gauge changed. Same number of stitches, but different width means the size of the stitches changed. They got bigger, and so that means it takes more room to fit the same number of stitches. That was a little better. Still a little too much of a texture on a shawl than what I would want. So I went up a size again to 4.5 millimeters. Now that is a 2 needle size change. And again, you can see I'm not stretching it. I'm just allowing it to open as it will. And you can tell that there's definitely a size change widthwise. Again, 40 stitches across, but the stitches are even larger, and so it takes up more space. Gauge change. That one's better. It's a little bit more floopy. And look at there. You can see my finger through it. Can't there, and can't there, but you can there. That means the stitches are larger. It's more floopy. That's what I'm looking for, but it still wasn't enough. So I jumped up. Again, not stretching it, just letting it go where it's going to. This is a 4.5. This is a 5. Can definitely see my fingers through it. It's a lot floopier. Still not quite what I wanted, but again, it's wider. This is one. You know what? This is 2 sizes bigger, because there is a 4.75. So 2 needle sizes larger. It's expanding in this direction. Same 40 stitches, but it's getting wider. And you can tell it's getting wider because looky there. My fingers are on the edge of the 3.5. Can you see that? Is that showing up at all? See how drastic of a difference that is? Let me move that over here. Not stretching. That's a drastic change. So if you were knitting a pair of socks and it was that'd be a good 1.5 inches total that was added. That would be a slouchy, unfitting sock, or a sweater that's way too big. Or if you're supposed to knit this size and it comes in this, that sock's going to be too tight and that sweater's going to be too tight, and it's going to show bulges that you didn't realize that you had on your body. That's not a good thing. That's a gauge change. In the terms of the shawl, this is getting closer to what I want. I want floopy. I want larger than this. I don't want something dense. And this is not something to wear to stay warm. It will keep you warmer than if you didn't have it, but the goal of this is not to keep out the bitter cold wind like a sweater would. This would be good for a sweater, or even a little bit denser than that for a sweater. This is closer, but it's still not what I want. I'm using the same yarn, it just, the color changed, the variegation changed. So this one is, I still have it on the needles. I don't know why, I just haven't taken it off. So this is, you know what, let's do this. There we go. I apologize for this. Let me do that. I zoomed out so that way you can see. I've got my notes here. Not stretching it. Let's pull it off this needle. I think I kept it on the needle so that way it wouldn't frog while I was waiting to show, because this has been done for going on 3 weeks now, and I just didn't want it to frog before I had a chance to show you. So there we go. Not stretching it, just opening it and letting it lay as it will. This is a 5. This is a 6.5, so we've gone up 2 needle sizes. There's not a 5.75. And right here was the last bit of black, because you can see, oh, there's a section that comes down, and that's the orange and black marl. That is when the color changed right there. It was a sudden, abrupt change. I was hoping it would kind of fade into the other one slowly, but it did not. It just jumped straight into it, which that's okay. It's a unique design, and that's okay. I went ahead and tried some yarn overs because the pattern that I'm doing has yarn overs, and I wanted to see how it looked and what they would look like. This is a 6.5 with my metal needles, and that is important that I specify that. And again, let's take a look. This is not stretched. 40 stitches across. Here is my 3.5, 40 stitches across. Do you see that crazy difference? Same number of stitches, bigger stitches, so it's wider. That is gauge. That is gauge in real life. So I knew I liked the 6.5. That was the size I liked. That was floopy enough. I mean, when you hold it like this and it comes around to a point, that is a floopy gauge. That's what I want. I want it to be flowy. I want it to be as if it was like water. It just flows and it's just floopy. That's what I want in a shawl. That's not what you want necessarily. Definitely not what you want in a sock. You may like that in a scarf, and you may like that in a sweater, something that's very, like a cardigan. Like for a summer cardigan, you may want something that's very lightweight and floopy. So I like the 6.5, but I wanted to do an experiment. And so this top section here is done in a 6.5, but in a bamboo needle. So same material, or same size needle, but different material. And the bamboo needle, that makes it have a little bit more drag to it because it's not so slick. The needle isn't. And so the yarn tends to, snag really isn't the right word. I mean, that's what it does. It takes a little bit more force to get it to slide along. So sometimes I can bring your gauge in a little bit. Sometimes I can make it wider. But I just wanted to see what it would do. So 6.5 metal with the yarn overs added. It's yarn over and then decrease, so I don't add stitches, so I don't have 43 stitches now. I still have 40. But again, I just want to show the difference in the 3.5 and the 6.5. There's a lot of needle sizes in between that. 40 stitches in the black, 40 stitches in this orange and black, and that's such a drastic difference in gauge. Again, you can't see my fingers through that. You could watch TV through that. That thing is very floopy. I could have gone on. I do have my largest circular needle is, I'm going to set that right there so that way it still lights up. I apologize for that, but I want to get out my largest circular needle that I have. the light sticks to my camera deal, so it shows, zoom back in, regular, so that way it lights up, so there's less of a shadow effect. But these are the needles I use. I use the Addy needles, and I like their, you can't see because of this, let me find another, there we go, Scacell, and I like their Rocket. It is a long taper and sharp tip, slick turbo finish, smooth joins, and pliable cable. It is coated in white bronze, I believe, and on the back it talks about the company that makes it, and it's been made in Germany since 1829, and it just talks a lot about that. I will leave that like that here, so if you want to pause and read that, you're welcome to. Anyway, so this was done in a 6.5. The largest needle size that I have is an 48-inch needle. The largest that I have is a US 11, which would be an 8mm. This is a 6.5mm. In the US, you cannot get a 7 or a 7.5. You can get it overseas and you can order it, but that is not a US size. So it goes from a US, or from an 8mm, and it jumps straight on to a 9mm. You cannot get the 7s. And that's quite a jump. It goes from a US 11 to a US 13. And then, like I said, a 48-inch, this is a 60-inch. So this would fit more of the shawl on there. But I was afraid that this would be so big and loose and too much floopy. And the stitches themselves would be so large that the yarn overs, it wouldn't, I was afraid it wouldn't work right. And I didn't want to go quite that large on yarn so small. I was afraid it just looking at it and it'd fly off the needles. That just wasn't what I wanted to do. But there's the size of the needle there, versus I'm sorry, that's creaky. This is the 6.5, or a US 10.5. This is the needle that I knit on that. That's why it was on that needle in the first place. But you can see there's quite a bit of a difference in size. Well, being around knitting needles, that's quite a bit of a difference in size, and that would make this fabric so much larger. But before I, continue cackling on like a crazed lunatic about knitting needles, this was a way for me to show you. I'm going to zoom back out so I can kind of put this whole thing out here so you can see it. Again, not stretching it, just letting it lay as it will. The difference in size. But this was a good way for me to show you how important gauge was, and I hope you grasped what a difference a needle size makes. Here's a very visual representation of that. I mean, there's a marked increase from right here up to down. But I needed to figure out what gauge I wanted for my shawl. And this gave me a very good way of seeing that. And normally I would just knit a section. Nope, I don't like that, rip it out. Knit a section. Nope, I don't like that, rip it out. But I decided to go ahead and leave it all in one chunk because that's a very good teaching aid. So again, we have 3.5. See what my notes are. I've got it written down. 3.5, 3.75, 4.5, 5, 6.5 with yarn overs on my metal, and 6.5 regular on bamboo. Again, 40 stitches across. Okay, so that's why I constantly say gauge is important. It's important to swatch and see what it is that you're looking for, and it's just so important to take that time to swatch and make sure if you're trying to get this and you end up with this, then what you need to do is you need to go up needle sizes. If you need this and you're getting this, then you need to go down needle sizes. You need to make smaller stitches. So take the time, knit a gauge swatch, because again, if you're going for a sweater that's a size extra large and it's supposed to be this gauge and you're knitting an extra large sweater at this gauge, same stitches, your sweater is going to be, you know, like a 10X. It's going to be absolutely massive. And if that's what you're going for, that's wonderful. Do it. But if you're trying to knit what the pattern says, you need to make sure you're getting the correct gauge. And vice versa. If you're knitting a small sweater in this size and you're getting this, you're going to end up with a child's sweater. So it's something to think about. And socks is even more important. I mean, if you're only working and only needing this size and you're ending up with this, well, unless you're trying to knit a Christmas stocking that's so loose that you look at it and the toys are going to shoot out of it, then your sock is not going to turn out like you want, and you've spent a lot of time on something that you cannot wear. So take time, check your gauge. If it's too big, go down needle sizes. If it's too small, go up needle sizes. So this should be the last video on gauge unless there is a very specific question. But there is the gauge swatch and Swatch Lab. I did not do any knitting on camera, but hopefully that was explained efficiently. It definitely was not concise, but hopefully that dispels the myth of you don't need to knit a gauge swatch, because you absolutely need to knit a gauge swatch. Until you've gotten the chops and you've knit a bunch and you know that with this yarn at this size needle, you're going to get this consistently. Until you know that, do a gauge swatch so this doesn't happen, okay? So hopefully you learned something from here, and if nothing else, you can, you know, make it a drinking game and watch it again, and every time I say gauge or important or any other word that I've repeated multiple times, take a shot of grape juice, or better yet, grape soda is my weakness, and just go through and, you know, turn it into a drinking game. But that's Swatch Lab, and that is the importance of gauge. In our next section, I would like to go over my project updates. I have 3 project updates. 2 are finished projects and 1 is a work in progress. I do not have an update for my Temp Afghan. I've been out of the house sitting, so I haven't been able to work on it like I want to, so I'm quite a bit behind, but I will get that caught up soon. But we're going to look at 2 separate scarves and the Gnome for March, Gned Newman. So we will switch over to the overhead to take a look at those up close here in just a moment. But I can show you, here's Gned. And I've got the Bamboozled Scarf, sorry. I have that complete. So we'll take a look at that overhead and talk about the stitch markers and all of that. And then the last one, the other scarf, is in my travel knit kit. So we'll take a look at that in the overhead as well. So let's go ahead and switch over and take a look at these up close and go over details a little bit more in depth. In the overview, we discussed my upcoming projects, or my project updates. And I wanted to show you those. And so let's start off with, let's see here. Goes, no, I'm not even sure. There we go. It goes this way. It's hard to tell when it's in garter stitch because it looks the same in both directions. So let's zoom in a little bit here, and I want to go over these markers. There was 25 stitches across, and I brought the yarn forward and slipped the stitch on the sides, which gave it a very pretty edge and, you know, boxed it in very nicely. You know, gave it a nice little border. Each marker marked 30 ridges, or 60 rows. And these little purple markers marked when it was that I showed you the last update. And here. I honestly have no memory of why I put a white marker on here. No clue at all. I do know that there was definitely a reason, and it made sense at the time. Let's see if I can hop over real quick and figure out what it was why I did that, but I can tell you that on this that there was 11,850 stitches in total, and I worked on it from April 15th to July 13th, not all at once, just over the course of that. Let's see here, pulling up my notes. I did not mark or put any notes as to why I put that white marker there. So that's interesting. Who knows? You can enjoy it with me. I will put up a picture of me wearing the scarf before I move on to the next project update. But it's a very nice scarf. I'm happy to have it, and honestly, I'm happy to be done with it. This was one of the first things that I really had knit. I had ripped it out and used some of the yarn to knit up a pair of mittens. I had already knit a hat, but this is a very special yarn to me for a lot of reasons that I'll not go into on this video. Maybe in text or whatever, I may work on going over that. But this was one of the first things that I remember really knitting that I still have. So this is the oldest thing that I knit that I still have. The oldest thing I knit was a blanket for my grandfather, which you have seen on this. I think you've seen it on this video, or on videos. If not, I know I've sent pictures. If I can find a picture, I'll pop it up on here at the end of my project update sections and show you. It was done entirely in acrylic and was in honor of his service in the military. It had a bunch of the different, he was in the National Guard and the Navy, and I did National Guard colors. So that's the oldest project that I knit to completion. This is the oldest project that I have that I knit to completion for myself using this yarn. Obviously not this scarf, but using this yarn. I knit a hat and then I knit a scarf. So it's a very sentimental thing for me. So I was very happy to have that. The next project that I completed is Gned. And let's go over a little bit about Gned. I worked on him from May 28th to July 15th. Again, not continuously. I kind of fell off the wagon on knitting gnomes for a little bit, and that's perfectly fine. Better to fall off the wagon for a small time than bust through them and burn out of knitting altogether. So little breaks are okay. Gned is the Gnome of the Month for the March edition of Gnomes of the Year in the Newman clan. He began the clan in the Emerald Isle. And that was a lucky break to be sure, as it is the largest branch or house in the Newman clan. So he is a very lucky gnome. And of course, Don's green because he's from Ireland, or took the clan to Ireland, not from it. So that is Gned Newman. And this one you can kind of see the sunburst pattern as the decreases are worked and it slowly comes around. It creates this kind of a swirl effect. But that's Gned Newman. My next project is what I took travel knitting with me, or what I take when I travel knit. And this is one of the 4 projects that I've talked about in these videos that I had planned on doing for the future, and I got permission from the recipient. This is going to be a Christmas gift, and they're going to get to see their Christmas gift. But let's talk a little bit about this. You know, very simple little scarf here. There are 30 stitches across, and you'll see why here in a moment. And every 50 ridges is marked by a yellow marker, which you'll see when I flip this over, or by yellowish markers. That one's a little bit on the chartreuse side. But this is called the best scarf ever, and I'll put that up along this bottom here. But it uses a mosaic pattern that I created. It was one of the first ones that I designed, and I'm very happy with it. The mosaic pattern is called True Balance. And let's zoom in a little bit, get rid of some of that wrinkle and some of all that other on the side. Okay. So again, there's 30 stitches across, and I needed something that I'd have plenty to have a border and plenty to have this, because from this edge, let's see here. Okay, from this right here, zoom in really close here so you can see. I know that orange is really easy to see, but right next to it is some blue, and it looks like it ties in here, but see how these go side to side, and here you have the little V's? Well, that little V means that's the beginning edge of the pattern. So the repeat for this is that first blue dot, or blue section, all the way over to the first blue in this section. There's 2 stitches there. Again, that's trying to curl over. There you go. See the 2 blue? So it goes from right there to right there, and from right there to right here. So that down to right there. That orange begins it, and that dot ends it. So that way you have these, it's completely framed in by this checkerboard pattern. So I did 2 patterns across, and each repeat is 11 stitches across, and would be 11 rows tall, or rows up. And I chose to do 3 repeats, so that way it wasn't just this small little section. I didn't want just a band, and that felt too much, so I went ahead and did 3 sections. And I'm very happy with how that section's worked out. I have not blocked it yet, so it does want to curl around. I mean, it wants, that's how it wants to set. It will not do that once I'm finished with it. And some people, after they block, if it has a really bad tendency to curl, or if the backside is particularly nasty looking, I don't think this side is, but some people may not like that. I have seen where people will actually cut out a piece of fabric or felt or flannel and stitch it to here, and that will keep it laying flat and will hide all of that back there. But there's just something, you would lose the stretch with that, and I don't want that. So this scarf will have one of these panels on both ends, and this blue section here will be about 4 feet long, and then I'll start the other repeat. I had a bunch of this blue, and some of the people's favorite colors is black and orange and olive and more denim-y blue. And again, this is going to be a Christmas gift. They know they're getting a scarf. They have not seen the pattern to the scarf yet. So this is kind of a spoiler to their Christmas gift. So that is what I've been working on with my TV knitting. I do not have an update on my Temp Afghan. I should, but I'm running quite a bit behind on that, which is okay. I will get it caught up. With it being so hot, it's hard for me to find the desire to start working on that blanket that has to sit on my lap. I try knitting it off of a table, and that works sometimes, but there's difficulties in that. So once the months cool down, once the days start cooling down, I can sit down and bust through a bunch of the blanket and get caught up. So I'm not worried about getting behind. I will have it done by the end of the year, like my plan is. Well, January 1st, it should be completed on the knitting part, and then I'll take starting January 2nd through whenever on getting those ends woven in on that. So those are my updates. I did want to mention, because I forgot to, I'm over here looking at my notes now. The pattern is called True Balance, and there are 39 ridges from here to this last orange in the mosaic pattern repeats, and then I'm marking 50 ridges in just the blue, so I can kind of keep an update and keep a count, because I know this is 39 ridges, so that's 39 times 30 will give me the stitch count for right there, and then I can just keep track. There's 3,000 stitches because it's 30 across and 100 rows. 30 times 100 is 3,000, and so I can help keep stitch counts. I like to keep stitch counts whenever possible. They don't necessarily do anything. I just like knowing how many stitches I've put into something, because that means I've put that much attention and that much care and that much work into something, and I want it to look as well as I possibly can, because that's a lot of work and that's a lot of stitches and that's a lot of time. So that's my updates for my projects, and here will be the picture of my Afghan that I knit for my grandfather, if I can find the picture, and if not, well, then we'll just transition off to the next one and just know that I did actually knit it. So hopefully you enjoyed the project updates and are excited to see progress as I go further along. I know I am. In the first bonus bit section, we are going to be blocking this hat right here together on film, so that way you can see what blocking is, what that process entails, and a little bit more about it, and so I can explain what it is, what it isn't, and all that together. So that will be a little bit more of an on-location thing, because I'm going to be filming at different spots, so you will not see this background for that part of the video. So again, we're going to be blocking this hat here behind us. This will do for a hat. So let's go ahead and go on an adventure and block a hat together. Okay, talking about blocking, and particularly blocking a hat. Here's the hat. Let me zoom out. I don't know why my camera is acting contrary this time. It does not normally give me this much trouble, but c'est la vie. This is the hat that we will be blocking together. This is This'll Do for a Hat. I knit this one top down and bound off along the brim, where normally I start with the brim and bind off up here at the very tip top. This time I started here and worked my way down. I did not do a pinhole cast on, although you absolutely could, and that would probably be recommended rather than what I did. I did a Judy's Magic cast on to knit it, so it's actually like 4 stitches across right here. It's a little band, and then it comes out in this starburst pattern. But we're going to be blocking this together today, and what you will need is a large bowl big enough to hold this, big enough to hold your hat, and big enough that this can completely submerge underwater, because it has to be completely submerged to do a wet block. There are multiple types. I'll get into that later, but you'll need a large bowl. You will need, in our case, I'm going to be using some wool wash, which I will show you when I get to where the bowl is and get all of that point. You will need a large towel, and you will need some sort of form for our type of blocking. I actually bought, it's a wig form, 22 for a size 22 head. But before I bought this, I did all of mine with a balloon, and I got a big jug or a big cup, or a bowl, something that balloon could set in, and I would block the hat on that. You can also, so this is called wet blocking, the method that we're going to be doing today. You can also do steam blocking, which is where you put it on your form and you would use a steam iron or a clothing steamer, something that actually is going to get very hot, because it does need to be hot. And you would need some form that you can actually steam onto. So styrofoam or a balloon would not be a good choice. But if you happen to have a large round bottom jug or something similar to the size you're wanting, like maybe a small fish bowl that doesn't have the lip necessarily, you could block onto that. There's a lot of different methods. You could also just take another towel and ball it up into the shape and around the same size that you want, and stick your head over it and steam block it that way. I steam block my acrylic because that is the only way to block acrylic, because it actually slightly melts the acrylic. It's called killing it, and that keeps it in the shape that it wants to. You can also block where it just lay it flat. It's not going to have the same result because this crown is going to act funny. It's going to want to, see, if I did like that, it'd lay flat perfectly, but then it'd have that nasty crease in it, and that's not what I'm looking for. So you can fully submerge and wet block. You can use a steam iron. You can also put it on your form, pin it out, and just spray it with a spritz bottle and leave it pinned out until it's dry. That is a form. And you can also block simply by taking it, throwing it in the washing machine, throwing it in the dryer. So whatever the way is that you're going to wash your item is how you block your item. Okay, so if I block this, wet block this, put it on the form and go through all of that, and then from that point on I'm going to throw it in the washer and dryer, well then I'm going to throw this in the washer and dryer to begin with. Blocking is to finish it. It helps the stitch definition to go like it's supposed to. If there is a pattern that you have knit into it, like cables or ribbing or yarn overs, you can block to where that is more visible. But blocking is also washing and taking care of your garment, getting all the dirt and the gunk out of it, and the smells, if we're being completely honest, helps get all of that out of there. So that's some of the things you can do with blocking. So let's jump over and go on our little field trip and go to the large bowl of warm water. Do not use hot water. You want it to be very warm, not hot, okay? If there's steam rising off of it, let it cool a little bit. So somewhere between room temperature and warm, okay? Definitely well below a simmer. So probably just your sink faucet on high. But my particular wool wash that I'm using says room temperature water. So that's what I do. I just run hot for a little bit, and then I turn on the faucet and cool and put my hand in there until it just feels around room temperature. I usually go just a little bit above room temperature, but that's just me. But one thing I want to point out, and I will mention it multiple times, when your item is wet and fully saturated and soaked, do not wring the water out, or you will forever distort the project you are blocking. Do not wring it out. That can break fibers and destroy it. What you will do is you will squeeze the fibers. Okay, you will squeeze the water out. Do not wring it. You can also send it through if your washer has just a spin cycle. You can. I've heard some people will put it in there and just spin the water out. You can use a salad spinner. I know a lot of people use a salad spinner, but some people's washer, unless there's a certain weight in it, it will not fully spin. It'll just bounce it around, and that can cause felting. And felting is when the stitches meld into one thing. So instead of it being separate stitches, it's now the stitches kind of interlock like that, and it becomes one piece of fabric, and that causes it to shrink because it removes all the space out of there, and it shrinks down. So your hat may start here and it may shrink down, as much as that, and then it won't get on the person's head because it's shrunk, good 2 or 3 inches. So just something to keep in mind of. So let's go ahead and jump over to the process of actually blocking it. Okay, we are in my bathroom and we are fixing to block Thistledew for a hat. I do not have my microphone plugged in. I do not have the setup on the stand, so it may be a little shaky. I will apologize for that. This is the wash that I'm going to be using. When I flip the camera around and show you, you'll be able to actually read. This does not require to rinse your garment afterwards, which is why I like this. It also is lavender citrus, so it smells good on top of all of that. I use just this large mixing bowl for hats. Again, most of my scarves are acrylic, and so I always steam block those, so I don't need anything with that. But you can use even something as large as the bathtub to block if you want to. Some people use, there is a litter box system where there's a bottom box and then it's got a like a mesh screen, like a colander in there, and that way you can lift up and all the kitty litter falls through and all the undesirables stay up on top. So some people will get a brand new set of those and use that to block, like if they have a sweater or something. Just make sure you have the right size container for your garment. It needs to be completely submerged. So whatever that takes, better to go up a size than go down and it scrunch up and not everything gets wet. So we're going to start off. I'm going to flip the camera around. I apologize. I do not have a maid that comes in, so my bathroom is not spotless. So I apologize if that offends some of your sensibilities. But I'm going to start running this hot water and get that going, and we'll flip around. Okay, so the wool wash that I'm using, if this will focus, no rinse, delicate wash, enhanced with lanolin for softness. Some people are allergic to lanolin, so if you wear a wool sweater and you start itching, it could be from the lanolin, so be aware of that, okay? It's going to be hard to show the, there we go, washing instructions. So 1 teaspoon for every gallon of cold water is what this says. It's not going to clear up again for me. So I just take and squirt what I think is about a teaspoon in there. And again, I do room temperature water, so I will run the water on hot and get no scoops worth. And pour directly on it like that, and use my fingers and get that all mixed in really good. You don't want to do this when your garment is in there because that agitation can cause it to felt. So to felt, it needs heat, moisture, and agitation. Sometimes just agitation can do it. So be aware of that. So now we're just going to fill up this. I think that's probably enough at the hot. So we'll start filling up with cold. I didn't know how to put this on a stand to where it would show up the best. So I'm just holding it, again, no microphone. I didn't want to deal with electronics and trying to get this water and keeping the cord out of the shot. I'm going to go one more scoop of cold. Not for the temperature, just for the volume. A little bit more. Okay. Never done this one-handed, so bear with me. So now we take our item and we want to put that in the water. And we want to let that, sorry, going off screen here. Want to let that submerge in completely. Don't wring it. See those bubbles coming up? In a very demented way, you want to do this until the bubbles stop coming up. So it's almost like drowning. You want to hold it down until the bubbles stop. Because that means the air is out and it has fully saturated. So a lot of times in blocking, you leave it in a good 30 minutes. But I have known people who will be blocking and going to do 30 minutes, and they may leave it in there accidentally for anywhere from 2 hours to as many as 6 hours. And there's no harm done. Your garment's just wet. It's fully saturated, so there's no reason to worry about any of that. So we're just going to let that set for 30 to 45 minutes, and then we will take that out. I will use a tripod because I need to squeeze out the water, and I need two hands. Not wring it and don't twist it. Just squeeze out the water. And then we will put it down here on this big towel that I folded in half, and then again so it's in quarters, and then we'll roll it up, step on it, get all the water out, and then put it on the form and block. So I will check back in a good 45 minutes. Okay, it's time now to drain this hat. And you've got two options. You can just take and just pour out all the water and leave the hat in the container. I don't like to do that simply because I like to see what's come out of the hat. So what I will do first is, and I apologize for it being so far away. I've never filmed like this, so this is a little tricky for me. Let me see if I can just move this like this. Hopefully that will help. So I just take and push the hat down. Just kind of tap on it. Just making sure everything feels fully soaked. Then I will come up underneath it, kind of scrunch it up like that, come up underneath and pick up everything at once the best that I can, so that way nothing is drooping behind. A colander would be a really good idea right here. And pick it up and let it just kind of drain. Then I switch it over into one hand, and I do not wring it out. No twisting. Just, and you can see Mama Kitty's helping me. Just take and just squeeze every bit of water that you can. Not twisting. That's important. And squeeze every bit that you can. Okay? And I don't know if you can tell, but this water has taken on a slight purple tint from this. Some of the dye, very little bit, has come out. So then I can just take and pour all that off. It seemed actually fairly clean, but it has not been worn yet. So that's not super surprising. Okay, now we're going to take our hat, and let me set this, try and adjust this here. Again, I've never filmed like this, so I apologize for the crazy filming. Trying to get this to cooperate here. Mama Kennedy's watching me like I'm insane. There we go. Something about like that. Okay. Now then, I'm going to step around and come out from this top edge. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our hat and we're going to lay it out. Okay? So about like that. And we're going to flip it over. Okay? And then we're going to roll it up like so. And we are going to step on it. And I want to make sure, let me move this closer. I want to make sure I push out every bit of water out of it that I possibly can. Okay? Yes, I'm wearing pajamas and socks and shoes. Okay, and making sure to push down, not like this, and not push down and slide, okay? Straight down. Now we're going to take our project. I'm going to go ahead and stop the filming, and we'll start up again in my room where we're going to do the blocking. Okay, we have transported to my bedroom. We're going to unroll the towel and undo the towel. Move my form for a moment. And there is the hat. It's still very damp. And you know, it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and put this on another towel, roll it up good, and stamp on it. But it's important that there is a layer of towel fully over it before you roll it, okay? You don't want this folded and rolled up against itself, okay? But I'm going to leave that as is because I don't mind. And we're going to get rid of the towel. We are done with it now. I'm going to get our form. And notice I have it held folded up because it's still very delicate right now. Okay, and we're going to take our hat and do our best to get the crown on the center of it. And we're just going to put the hat down, you know, just smoothing out the edges like that. We're just going to leave the hat like this. Now it looks super floopy, and it's going to be until it's fully dry. And it seems like it's going to stretch, but that's okay because you can always roll that cuff up and have a little bit extra warmth. So now all we have to do with blocking on this is leave it to dry, and that is it. This week's last tidbit is a correction from the last video when I talked about Webs, which is a potential local yarn shop that's online. I mentioned that Webs is spelled capital W-E-B-S, so I thought it stood for something. So I reached out to their customer service and asked them, and they very graciously responded and said Webs does not stand for anything. When they first started, they dealt primarily with weaving, and with weaving you send strips. You know, you've got this apparatus and you send lines of yarn back and forth, and then you weave up and underneath those strands. And because they were doing that, it reminded them of a spider web, and so their name, because it was just yarn.com, because that's the website that you type in to get to Webs. And so when they started crocheting and making shawls, it looked even more like spider web. So when they decided to change the name of their company, they changed it to Webs as a homage to their beginnings of weaving and crocheting. So it does not stand for anything. It is simply a callback to their future. But I did want to get that cleared away because they did make a very special effort to reach out and respond to me. So I was very appreciative of that. So I just wanted to update you on that. And that is the video for this week, where this was Knit Bits number 11. So I have 4 more videos planned, and we'll see what life holds beyond that. I'm not stopping these. Again, I may just, stretch out how far apart they are. I had planned on releasing this last week, but then was asked to house set, and so that threw a kink into everything, which was good. gave me some time to really focus in on what it was that I wanted to do and on this particular episode. And because of that, I added blocking this hat behind me, which I am filming all of these overview parts before I start blocking that hat. So these are filmed in different orders. So you may see that, sitting there and think, well, he's blocked it, obviously it's done because it's still in the same spot. But no, it's filmed in segments. But you will see the finished hat on this video just as soon as it dries. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that I do have 4 more videos completely planned out, and I'm excited to see where we go from there, because I have thoroughly enjoyed making these, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed watching these. So until Knit Bits number 12, enjoy and keep knitting.